find farmer protests very interesting. How about you? In the past, Rebel News has covered the farmer rebellion in the Netherlands. I think we sent reporters there 3 different times to cover that fight. I learned a fair bit about farming in the Netherlands. Don't laugh. It's actually very interesting and very surprising. Let me start with this fact. Did you know this? The Netherlands, which is a pretty small country geographically and doesn't even have 20 million people, it's the 3rd largest exporter of food in the world, behind only the United States and Brazil. Are you surprised by that? I was. I mean, you got to admit that's surprising that it's such a huge producer, huge especially in dairy and eggs. And you probably know that. There's all sorts of Dutch cheeses like Gouda. They're huge in meat, and they lead the world in flowers, which is part of agriculture, even though we typically don't eat flowers. It's such a huge industry for a physically small country. But then again, we sometimes forget that the Netherlands was once a global empire. Amsterdam was their mighty ship-going city. There was colonies, Dutch colonies around the world. I don't know if you remember the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch in South Africa. To this day, there's still Boer farmers there who speak a kind of Dutch called Afrikaans. In the Caribbean, Dutch Guiana, even in Japan and Taiwan, in Indonesia. If you ever sailed on Holland America, you'll see there's Dutch captains and Indonesian staff. That's a legacy of the Dutch Empire. Even New York City, you know what it was called first? New Amsterdam, not New York. Very interesting place. Anyways, don't underestimate the Dutch, I'll tell you that, and don't mess with their farmers. I still don't quite understand the war on Dutch farmers, but from what I could glean from our reporters and just my own reading, it was driven in part by environmental extremism. The same way Canada is obsessed with the element on the periodic table called carbon, you know, the 6th element on the periodic table. Well, the Dutch, at least some of them, are obsessed with nitrogen. That's the 7th element on the periodic table. I know that sounds crazy. It would be, well, I think a lot about hydrogen. Oh, me, I'm a helium guy. I mean, what are you doing? Those are basic building blocks of the universe. I was curious, so I checked, and you know, nitrogen and carbon were officially discovered as elements in the same year, 1772. What a coincidence that is. That's almost exactly 250 years ago, by the way. And if you had told any scientists over the past 250 years, until maybe 20 years ago, that we would literally try to, I'm laughing saying it, decarbonize the world or denitrogenize the world, they would have said you were absolutely crazy, and you certainly were not a man of science. You were maybe some sort of a witch or something. I mean, carbon is the stuff of life. You think about the word carbohydrate. That's what we eat. Every single living thing is made from carbon. You're made from carbon. Everything we eat, every plant, every animal, our breath that you exhale is carbon dioxide. It's crazy to think we're going to get rid of carbon. Nitrogen, too. It's literally in our DNA. Without those 2 basic elements, all life on Earth would immediately cease. Imagine being a kook who says, we have to get rid of carbon. Well, can you imagine those kooks on the carbon side? Because we know them. We've been fighting with them in Canada for 20 years. But in the Netherlands, they've been going after farmers for using fertilizer that includes nitrogen, that very basic element. I'm serious. It's a war against farmers. The farmers fought back, though, with these rebellions I'm telling you about, and did something incredible that the Dutch parliamentary system allows. The Dutch farmers started a political party, and in the Dutch system, which is a little bit confusing, but it has an important form of proportional representation. You know what that is, right? You get a certain percentage, you get seats. It's not like a constituency system. Anyways, look at what happened. And I'm reading from the BBC here. Farmers Protest Party wins shock Dutch vote victory. They immediately became the biggest party in the Dutch Senate. Let me read a bit because it's just such a pleasure to read this. A farmers' party has stunned Dutch politics and is set to be the biggest party in the upper house of parliament after provincial elections. The Farmer Citizen Movement, BBB, was only set up in 2019 in the wake of widespread farmers' protests, but with most votes counted, they are due to win 15 of the Senate seats with almost 20% of the vote. I think in the end they actually got 16. This isn't normal, but actually it is. It's all normal citizens who voted, said leader Caroline van der Plas. That's a wonderful little quote, isn't it? The BBB aims to fight government plans to slash nitrogen emissions harmful to biodiversity. Oh, shut up, BBC. By dramatically reducing livestock numbers and buying out thousands of farms. Look at that for a moment, eh? Shutting down farms, getting rid of animals. Does that ring a bell anywhere? I'll come back to that. The government was trying to order farmers to reduce the size of their herds in the name of environmentalism. Sounds like the ostrich farm. Now, it's a great story, the Dutch farmers, all the more great because I was just reading from the BBC there, and they hate farmers and nitrogen and carbon, and they're all sorts of crazy, and the Farmers' Party is the most normal people in the entire world. I really like that quote from their leader there. Anyways, the Dutch farmers have been at it for a while. You can see the party was started in 2019, but the farmers really started to fight back a few years later, including in 2022 when they had a ton of protests. And that's when they told us that they were inspired in part by the Canadian truckers. And you can see the similarity, get the big rigs on the road and, people respect truckers, they respect farmers, I think maybe even more. What a wonderful thing to hear from them. Don't mess with farmers. But I pointed out the anti-farm, anti-meat agenda of the Dutch government, right? I think the idea of culling enormous numbers of animals for no good reason, when you relook at the ostriches, there are reasons to put down animals on a farm. I get it. Every farmer knows that. And doing that humanely is part of being a farmer. But what outraged so many people about the ostrich situation is that the birds were all healthy by the time they were being killed. Had the Canadian Food Inspection Agency been there when the animals were actually sick a year ago, I think they would have perhaps had less opposition, but by the time they got their bureaucrats act together, the animals were all healthy. They had all gotten better from the avian flu, and in fact, they had herd immunity. Imagine insisting on killing every one of them nonetheless. It really does echo what they were trying to do in the Netherlands, doesn't it? You saw that BBC story. They want to kill the animals to save the environment, which is crazy because obviously the animals are part of the environment when you think about it. All of which is to say, look at London today. London, England. Wow. When I think of London, I do not think of farmers. It's such a huge metropolis, but an enormous protest happened today against the Labour Party, that's the government there, and their anti-farm budget today, with farmers from around the UK driving into the heart of London with their rigs. What an amazing sight. I mean, London is so iconic with the Parliament buildings and Trafalgar Square. To see these tractors there, I tell you, I like to go over there. I wish I was there to see it. Lots of Union Jacks being flown by these farmers. Yeah, not a single Hamas flag. Isn't that surprising? Farmers are the best people in the world. I mean, is there a more honest breed? Self-sufficient and so sufficient that one of them can feed 100 of us, maybe 1,000 of us. All of the qualities that make someone a great farmer also make them a great citizen. Patience, planning, thinking about the future, problem solving, harmony with the cycles of life, thinking long-term, caring for life, especially life that's weaker than us, feeding people no matter their politics, custodians of the land and water. I mean, I could go on. I suppose statistically, I'm sure a dishonest farmer does exist. Mathematically, I'm sure it happens, but I've never met a dishonest farmer in my life. Have you? Oh, and other things. They use equipment like tractors that need fuel. They protect themselves and their herds and flocks with firearms. Well, I guess not in the UK anymore, but in the rest of the world. But still, every quality and characteristic about farmers, you can see why left-wing governments hate them, right? I don't know any farmers who are on welfare, do you? Now, the farmers in the UK are motivated by a number of things, but the biggest one, if I am reading it right, is a new plan hatched by the Labour government in the UK that family farms would now have to pay a 20% tax on assets if they were to be passed down from father to son. So basically, it would destroy family farms to the advantage of corporate farms. Because say a farm is nominally worth £1 million. Okay, that's on paper. Obviously, that's the land and the equipment and the farmhouse and the cattle. It's not cash sitting around. How on earth could a family with a farm just scrape together 200,000 pounds to pay a tax to the government to allow the farm to continue to operate in the family? Why are they doing that? Well, the same reason the Canadian government and the Dutch government use. They probably wouldn't admit it, but they sort of hate farmers. They won't deny that they hate farming. Environmental reasons, cultural reasons, globalist reasons. The elites want expensive energy and expensive food. They'd rather have cloned meat or machine, printed meat, gross, diabolical things like that. They don't want farmers in touch with nature. They want you to be poor, by the way, expensive energy, expensive food. The World Economic Forum slogan, you'll own nothing and be happy. Now, Donald Trump's strategy is the opposite on those two key measures. He wants cheaper food and cheaper gas, and he talks about that a fair bit, and he's actually accomplished those things in less than a year. The price of food and fuel is coming down. That's not just a blessing to all Americans. That disproportionately helps low-income people. But just look at those protesters in the UK, orderly, polite, patriotic, but look at this. Just in the last day, London's atrocious police announced that all farm vehicles were suddenly going to be banned from the center of the city, just spraying that condition on the farmers, an ambush. But they ignored it, and to their peril, though, here's one farmer being arrested for daring to bring his tractor with him.
Being arrested just by Trafalgar Square. It's absolutely outrageous. This is the place of the public and farmers being arrested under Section 14 dispersal because the police the day before decide to say that they're not going to be allowed to protest.
I've asked you several times to follow the conditions. Get up to my tractor to get me.
Say, if you've been following us, you know that there are constant, huge pro-Hamas protests in London that shut down the downtown of the city center. I've covered some of these protests, so has Ezra Levant. There have been other protests in London too, including a major one just a couple of days ago, targeting a Jewish synagogue. Seriously, just pro-Hamas protesters swarming an individual synagogue and any Jews going there. It's got nothing to do with the Israeli embassy it's just ordinary Jews in their residential area. That same Metropolitan Police Force let that protest against the Jews happen, no problem. But if you're a farmer with a tractor, peaceful, patriotic, it's illegal to bring your vehicle to Parliament, say the police, even though Parliament is actually the proper place to protest the government, don't you think? Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm on the side of the farmers.